Okay, for number 1 of your essential skills page, you're going to have to find the greatest whole numbers, so that means no decimals, that divides numbers evenly. Okay, so we want to make sure that when we divide these numbers that it divides evenly, so no decimals again. So if I take the number 9, what you're going to do is start a little chart. I can do 9 divided by 1, and it's going to give me a whole number. So 9 divided by 1 can happen. If I do 9 divided by 2, that cannot happen because 9 divided by 2 won't be a number that can be evenly divided. I can try 9 divided by 3. That works. So we can put a 3 here. We'll do 9 divided by 4. That does not work. We can try 9 divided by 5. You'll recognize that doesn't work. 9 divided by 6 won't work. 7 won't work. 8 won't work. And finally, 9 divided by 9 will work because it gives you 1. So there's only 3 numbers that divide evenly into 9, and that gives you an even number. So we're going to do that same process for 12, except you don't have to write this work down all the time. This work you don't need to write. What you can just do is do it in your calculator. So unless you know it in your head as well, 12 divided by 1 does work. So you can divide 12 by 1. You can divide 12 by 2. You can divide 12 by 3. You can divide 12 by 4. You can try dividing 12 by 5. It works, but it is not even. 12 divided by 6 does work. 12 divided by 7 doesn't work. It works, but it gives you an uneven number. Not uneven, sorry, it gives you, it doesn't give you a whole number. 12 divided by 8 doesn't give you a whole number. 12 divided by 9 does not give you a whole number. 12 divided by 10, 12 divided by 11. Finally, we can divide 12 by 12. So 12 has a few more factors than 9. Now we have to pick, as it says here, the greatest whole number. So there's a lot of numbers that divide by 9 and 12, but we want the greatest one. So we can notice here that 9 is the highest number for the 9 selection here, but 9 is not part of any of these 12 numbers that we wrote down. So we know that 3 is the biggest number that we can divide evenly into each pair. So therefore, 3. Okay, if we try another example of this, we can do 6 and 10. Let's list the numbers that we can divide by 6. So 6 can be divided by 1. 6 can be divided by 2. 6 can be divided by 3. Cannot be divided by 4 and 5 if you want an even number, but you can divide by 6. So there are 4 numbers that can divide into 6. Now for 10, you can divide 10 by 1, by 2, not by 3 and 4 if you want even numbers, but you can divide by 5, not by 6, not by 7, not by 8, not by 9, but you can divide by 10. So if you take a look at these numbers, there's 4 for each, which doesn't really make a difference. You just have to see which one matches for both and which one's the highest. So the one that matches for both, you've got 2 options. You've got 1 and 2, but 2 is the highest number that you can divide evenly into each number. So therefore, 2. Number 2, you have to state each fraction in lowest term. So I'll just give an example of that. 12 over 24 is an example of that. You have to figure out what is the highest number that you can divide evenly with 12 and 24. Now my trick is I always try to go 24 divided by the lowest number. So 24 divided by 12, which is the lowest number, is 2, which means I can divide both the top and the bottom by 12, which will reduce your fraction into lowest terms. So 12 divided by 12 is 1. And 24 divided by 12 is 2. That's the final answer. The problem becomes when you have 12 over, let's say, 18. So I have to figure out if 18 divides by 12, and it doesn't. It doesn't divide evenly. So you have to find a number that's lower than 12 for this to work. So to do that, I usually list the numbers that 12 can be divided by, unless you're really good at division. But if you're not, like me, then I just list them. So 12 can be divided by 1, by 2, by 3, by 4, by 6, not 7, not 8, not 9, not 10, not 11, and by 12. And then I list the fact or the numbers that can be divided by 18. So by 1, by 2, you can divide 18 by 3, not by 4, not by 5, by 6, by 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Finally, 18 does work. So we find the highest one. As you can see here, you can divide both evenly by 6. So you might have known that right from the start, but you have to be careful. You can also divide by 3, but that won't put it in lowest terms. Okay, and I'll show you what I mean by that. 2 over 3 is the answer. But if you were to try dividing both by 3, because you might know that these two numbers can be divided by 3, you end up with 4 over 6. And 4 over 6 can be reduced again because both these numbers can be divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So you can take any method that you really want to pick. If you find it easier to divide by 3 first, then please go ahead and do that. So if you have operations with integers, which is number 3, if I give you something like the first example, which is -2 minus 4, there's a specific way of typing this into your calculator, but your teacher wants you to understand how you get to that answer. So to type this into the calculator, you need to make sure that you hit the negative button, not the minus. You have to hit the negative button. So you hit negative, you hit the 2, then you hit minus, so that's a negative. And this is a minus 4. Now when you press the equal button, you should get -6, okay? But why? A negative and a minus are basically the same thing unless you're typing it into the calculator. So there's a big difference when you type in a negative and a minus in your calculator. Some calculators don't really matter. It doesn't really matter, but for most, a negative and a minus is different. That may be why this concept is so different. So when you're doing work like this, you have to recognize what this number means. That number is -2, which means you have 2 negatives. So to represent 2 negatives, I just use 2 minus symbols. To represent this number, you have to circle the sign that's in front of the number. So that number is not just 4, it's actually -4. So to represent -4, you can write this. So as you can see, when you're looking for your final answer, there are 6 negatives. Now a lot of people see this as -2 minus 4. So -2 and you take away 4. That's basically the same thing, but it's more confusing. So I like to look at it as 2 negatives, then 4 negatives, okay, equals -6. Or you can use the number line. Okay, here's 0 in the number line. Okay, here's -5, -4. So you start at -2 on your number line, and this is more in the negatives, this is more in the positives. So I have to go 4 positions to the left because it's 4 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I end up at -6. So there's a variety of different ways that you can do this. Another way that some students like, instead of writing -2 minus 4, you could put -2 plus -4. That makes more sense because that's having 2 negatives plus another 4 negatives. So again, there's various ways to do this as long as you check your work in your calculator to make sure that you get -6 because there's no other correct answer. Okay, another example of this would be, So another example of this would be question B here. So -2 minus -4. So I'll just change it a little bit. So if you have -2 minus -4, you have 2 negatives that are stuck together. When you have 2 negatives that are stuck together, that means that they're being multiplied. And when you multiply a negative times a negative, it actually gives you a positive. So you need to rewrite this equation, or this expression, as -2 plus 4. Now in this case, I have 2 negatives, so I'm going to go ahead and put 2 negatives, and then plus 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. When I have negatives and positives, these are called zero pairs, and I'm going to cancel them out. So -2 plus 4 equals +2. Now notice I didn't put the plus sign here. That's because it's not necessary. Okay, now some of you guys may know that it's plus 2 from the get-go because we have more positives. We have 4 positives and only 2 negatives. So if you have 4 positives and then 2 negatives, that means I have more positives. So instead of adding these, you're going to do -4 minus 2, which gives you positive 2 because there's more positives. Now the last example can look something like this. -10 minus 2 over 4 minus -3. So you have a fraction, and you've got some math to do at the top, and you've got some math to do at the bottom. So we've got 10 negatives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I have 2 more negatives. So in total, I have 12 negatives. If you count all of these, there are 12 negatives. Now the bottom line, I have to rewrite this because I have a negative and a negative that multiply to a positive. So I'm going to rewrite 4 minus -3 to 4 plus 3, which should be easier because 4 plus 3 is 7. Now in this case, you need to make sure that your fractions are reduced in lowest terms. So 12 can be divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and then 12. 7 can only be divided by 1 and 7. So in this case, 1 is the only number that matches for both. But if I divide by 1, it won't change my answer. So -12 over 7 is the final answer for this question. So we have to fill in a couple blanks here of graphing on a coordinate grid. So the x-axis is the horizontal axis. So whenever you have a graph, you want to write down that the x-axis is the horizontal line. And the y-axis is the vertical line. Is the vertical axis. So anytime you write a graph, you want to have x and y on there. A coordinate in the xy plane is an ordered pair of numbers surrounded by a bracket. So whenever you're writing a coordinate, you have to make sure that there is a bracket written down. Otherwise, it doesn't represent a coordinate on a coordinate plane. So the 1 is the x coordinate and the -3 is the y coordinate. Always. So when you have a coordinate, you have to make sure that you know that the x is the first one and y is the second one. The coordinate of the point where the x-axis intersects the y-axis is called the origin. Okay. So that's where x and y meet at this point right here. And at that point, that's 0, 0. So it has the coordinates 0, 0. Let's just do a quick recap here. If we have the coordinate 4 and -6, 4 is the x, -6 is the y. And if we want to graph that, make sure you add x and y on your graph. We're going to start with x always. We're going to start at x equals 0, which is right here. And we're going to assume that each box is scaled by 1. So we're going to go to the right 4. But we're not going to do this because that's x equals 4. But you also want y to equal 6. So you're going to go to x equals 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but then go down to y equals -6. So the coordinate belongs right here. Now those dots shouldn't be there, so I'm going to go ahead and erase them. It's easy for me to do that because I've got technology, but don't put those dots on there. Go ahead and try graphing another coordinate. Let's try -2 and 8. So if we want to draw -2 and 8, I'm going to highlight that. Okay. -2 and 8, we're going to start at 0. And we're going to go to x equals -2. Well, -2 is on the left. Okay, so here's -2, 2 spots to the left. And y equals 8 is 8 positions above 6, 7, 8. So the coordinate should be drawn right here. That green coordinate is the coordinate -2, and 8.